Okay, so welcome to the June faculty meeting. We have both the teaching faculty from spring semester that just finished and the teaching faculty for fall that is ramping up. So I just thought I'd start with a sort of introductions because I realize Andrea has never met Erica, I don't think. But I think most of us have met each other before. So if you want to do a quick hi, where you are, and what else is going on in your house around you that you've just magically avoided showing on the camera. So I can start. Kelly Fleming, I'm in Blacksburg, Virginia, and my kids are doing like summers. We convinced them that school's still on, so they're doing summer school over there that way. So, but sometimes they come in that door. So anyway, and Erica, you're next on my list.
So Erica Harney from Dayton, Ohio, and we rearranged my kids' kind of corner over here to at least look a little bit more presentable. I got to work on my husband's corner now because, yeah, it's just a mess.
Great. And Andrea?
Hi, everyone. You saw what's going on in my house. We're also in the middle of a house renovation. We thought we would be done by now. So I'm actually in a corner room trying to hide away from, if you hear some banging, that's what's happening. We're on the home stretch of a big house renovation. So Minnesota, Minneapolis.
Yeah. Christy?
I'm in California now, in Central California, and I'm battling the heat here. Actually, it hasn't been too bad here. So it's really nice to see you guys.
Great. And Dan Wessner and Liz?
We're in Denver, Colorado, and we're going between hot days, and yesterday was very cool. We had a kind of a weird storm on Saturday that knocked down a lot of trees and stuff. So we're doing okay.
Great. Jody?
I have my video off because my internet has been horrible these last few days. But I'm in Pendleton County, West Virginia, about 15-20 minutes away from North Mountain headquarters. And everything's kind of getting back to normal in our household except for no baseball.
Luke?
That's not normal.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm calling in from Franklin and just staying busy. It looks like it's going to be a really nice day here. And I guess I'm teaching 601 again this fall.
Great. Mary? You're muted. Oh, good job.
I'm in Bala Cynwyd, Pennsylvania, hoping to get back to West Virginia this summer. Everything's just, we're sheltering in place and muddling through. It's all good. It's all good.
Great.
A lot of protests. There's so many protests around here to choose from. I guess that's what you get in a more urban area. And my daughter is living with us now. She came home from Vermont Law School to just like bunker in with us, and which is great. And and she and my son, who live in Philadelphia, are off doing protests all the time. So that's interesting. My husband and I are just mostly at their directive because we are now elderly, which is hard to believe, and we're kind of staying at home. So it's strange, but okay, we're getting through.
All right, great. Paula?
Hi, everyone. I'm in Matthias, West Virginia. I'm currently having no air conditioning in the 90-degree weather. Hopefully in the next 2 to 3 weeks, it will be fixed. We had a stray dog show up at our house last night. So we had a Great Dane puppy in the house last night. They just came to pick her up about like 10 minutes before the meeting started. So that's the only exciting thing on my end.
Cool. And Scott?
Yes, there we are. Hi, everybody. Greetings from Central North Carolina. I I recently set up a bird feeder outside of my office window, and I recommend it. It's been very, very cathartic to have that company. So just very briefly, this may be my last faculty meeting with you all. Who knows what the future holds? But I wanted to thank everybody. Whether you're playing tennis or golf or teaching, the way to get better really fast is to work with people who are a lot better than you and a lot smarter than you. And that's certainly been the case for me. So I'm really grateful to all of you in different ways for everything you've done to make me better at what I do. And I'm excited about the future and wish you all the best.
Thanks, Scott. Dan, we were just doing quick, did he disappear? He did. Okay, well, when he comes back, he can do a quick introduction. And Scott sort of segued into what I wanted to say was, yeah, this is sort of our last faculty meeting with a couple of key members of our team, which are Christy Hand and Jody Weimer and Scott. And I just want to say that it's going to be different around here without you guys. Thank you so much for your commitment to future generations and the work that you do, and that, as you know, you're always Future Generations alumni, and we hope to see you guys around. And please stay in touch if you have a grant you'd like us to process for you. Apparently that's something we're very good at. So I don't know. Anyway, Scott got a chance to say something. If Christy did, if you want a chance, feel free. Or it's a little bit on the spot, and I didn't give you any warning. So you good, Christy?
What do you say after 14 years? I mean, future generations will always be a part of me, and so and I appreciate the work that all you guys are doing. And I'm around. And right now I'm working with a few students who have, it's really been quite cool seeing what they're doing with the creativity in spaces where they have some choices to create their own programming and so independent study internship. I think those are some really cool spaces right now that some of our students are taking advantage of. And so prior learning assessment. So I hope that those will continue.
Yeah, no, I think we've had a lot of luck with that, and we're trying to work that fully into the program, really. Jody, would you like to say anything?
Just that it's been great to work with all of you guys, and I'll definitely miss you, but I'm also looking forward to the next chapter of what comes up.
Great to hear. All right. Well, let's see. So to start with the sort of business end of things. Oh, Scott, did you want to follow on, or you're unmuted yourself? So.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Sorry, I'll mute again.
That's okay. I just wanted to make sure. It's interesting how you learn new codes, right? Like unmuting yourself now means that you want to say something. Anyway, it's just interesting. Okay, business discussion. Grades are due the 19th of June. The sooner you get those in, the better, of course, for everyone. Jody's going to send out another reminder. We tried to do evaluations a lot earlier than traditionally we've done. So we're hoping that encourages students to complete the course evaluations. If you get inspired to send another reminder to them from you saying how important these are for the institution and how they're anonymous. What we like to do once the grades are in and once we feel like we've gotten the majority of the course evaluations, we do I'll send you some self-review questions. This is talking to the people that just finished their semester. You do sort of a I send you the course evaluation so you can see what students said, and you can give me your self-review of how things went, looking at what students said. Then we have a discussion about it. Then I write up a report that I then let you see and then goes into your faculty file. So that's sort of the process for finishing off the semester. Yeah, and so hopefully I was hoping to give you a little preview of what we've had come through so far, but that didn't quite happen. So I will, when we get them all in, I will take a quick sort of look over all 4 of them. So when we have our discussion, I can say how your course trended with other courses, just so you sort of see the general trends. Okay, what did I miss there? Yeah, so timing that, it looks like to give you enough time to see the course evaluations and do the self-reflection, unless you want to do that without that information. Looks like maybe that last, the early July, late June week seems to be the earliest we can get those in. I know people have plans, so if you want to schedule that into your calendar, feel free to send me an invite and we can just get through that process. Great. Does anybody have any questions about any of that sort of, did I miss something, Jody? I feel like I missed something, but.
No, but just please try to get your grades in by the 19th so that I can get those transcripts out before end of June when I head out.
Yes, that would be very helpful. Otherwise, I'm going to have to muddle through it, and that's going to be not as good.
And is there a deadline for the student evaluation, the course evaluations that we should tell them?
We don't usually set a deadline, but we usually coax them to do it as soon as possible.
Okay.
Because I put in their email that they receive that they won't get their transcripts unless they let me know that they've done it.
Got it.
So feel free to put the 19th as your deadline, or this Friday. But yeah, sometimes deadlines are helpful. Okay, great. So what I had on the schedule for, and Dan's back. Dan, sorry, I don't think I noticed when you came back. We were just doing a quick introduction of who we are, where we are, and what's going on around us. I'm talking about Dan Robeson. Hope he's there. There he is.
Well, I think I know everybody.
Okay.
I'm still emerging from lockdown in Rujanahuaque, Bolivia. As of now, my town doesn't have any positive cases, but the positive cases have been inching closer. The town's closer and closer. Overall, the Bolivian Amazon's been hit pretty hard. As soon as it got in, it just went like wildfire. And we have one town where they may be approaching herd immunity. I mean, everybody down the street was positive, so you don't know what to believe, but there are places that are like that. I'm going to be talking again about courses in the future.
Yeah. I was just I given everybody else a chance to introduce, and then you dropped off. So here you are. I'm glad you're back. Okay, so what I have on the schedule is because this concept of community lab is something that we're constantly reforming and in working on. What I'd like to talk about is to have the people who taught in the spring do again sort of a synopsis of what their community lab project was, and then how now that you've gotten students completing them, how that went. And maybe some tips and tricks about what you would have done differently. This is your chance to kind of give your best advice to the fall faculty. So and Andrea and Anthony, when he watches this, is going to really, and Luke, really going to appreciate. And Naomi's not here. Sorry, I'm just realizing people that I invited that aren't here. So she'll be also watching the recording and listening great to how things went with community lab projects this year. So Erica, you're first on my list of give us the example and how students did it or didn't do it,
So I was just pulling mine up. So for nonprofit management, we had a total of 4 labs that were spread out over the 16 weeks. And one was like a needs assessment, understanding the nonprofit, doing kind of an informal SWOT and pest analysis. The second one was an overview of programs and services and creating a logic model, which is, for those of you who have to do lovely grant applications or might be familiar with. So having them go through a logic model for their program. The third one was on grants and fundraising. So doing a fundraising analysis, understanding what their organization does in terms of fundraising and what they might suggest in terms of kind of growing their fundraising plan, as well as a quick letter of inquiry. So a lot of them were like, you're not going to make us do a full grant application, are you? And I'm like, no, I'm not, just a letter of inquiry. And then the fourth one was boards and governance. And this one I took a little bit of a different spin on because the previous ones were more like a written piece and to kind of give them the variety of just different ways of processing information and presenting it. We included Powtoon in the fourth one. So they could create a Powtoon video to kind of show the governance structure of the organization that they're working with, and how the governance at the board level works. So overall, the labs went really well, I think. So I incorporated into the schedule a draft deadline to where they could turn in, and it was graded strictly on participation, that they were at least making some progress. And then we took those and we shared them with the rest of the class, and had, as part of our weekly check-in Zoom call, anybody that wanted to go through theirs, get some feedback. So doing some peer assessment. We did, so ours was a fairly small group. We had a total of 14, and maybe on one call, like 9 at the most. So we never did any small group kind of things. So that was really helpful to get feedback from other folks. I will say that I had the same students over and over, really seeking feedback or wanting to share. That actually changed towards the last lab. So that was exciting. I had students who never really wanted to share their work with everybody, wanting to share their final lab. So that was exciting. And so a lot of them found that the whole process has been helpful because they were tangible things that they could actually produce for their organization. And that was intentional on my part, because I wanted it, again, to be practical and applied. So things that they would normally be doing in their organization, where we did kind of run into, not necessarily issues, but more like, this whole Powtoon thing doesn't really work for the organization that I'm working with, was that last lab, where I did have a couple of students say, that they at least tried to create a Powtoon cartoon around the governance structure. And they were like, this isn't really going to be applicable or helpful for my organization. Can I do something else? And I said, absolutely. So with the whole semester, with all the craziness of COVID and then all of our protests and things in the past few weeks, I did give them the flexibility through the whole semester that, and a lot had run up against their organization not being able to respond to them and answer their questions, like about their fundraising, about their grants, things like that. So I said, we'll work with the information that you do have, that you've already gathered from them, and maybe instead of sharing what they're currently doing, or more of the information that you would present, share what you do have, and then say what you might do in terms of recommendations. If you were working with this organization, how would you make change to improve their systems, or to improve their processes, based on the knowledge that you've gained from our Zoom discussions and lectures, from the readings that you've had? What suggestions would you make to do differently and to improve on the successes? Again, going back to seed scale, improving on successes to grow the organization and make it more sustainable. So with that fourth lab, I did allow them, if Powtoon's not going to work for you, choose a format that works for you, and gave them that flexibility too. So I think that was appreciated as well, because some of them, not all of them, but wanted that to be very practical for what they were doing.
Very cool. All right. And talked about how we're, we are living in very changeable times at the moment. So it's always good to have flexibility sort of at the core of our courses at the moment. All right, Mary, could you, or does anyone have any questions for Erica? Sorry. There's a lot of great stuff in there. I took some notes.
Yeah, I would just be interested, Erica, to know what you feel like either your greatest accomplishment, or, kind of what the biggest success in terms of the lab work, or the thing that kind of surprised you the most. Maybe something you thought, we'll see how this goes, it was a big success, or you thought something kind of like, I've had assignments I almost didn't put in the course, and then they were voted like the favorite.
Yeah.
So I'm always just interested to know, especially, it sounds like you had a couple really innovative labs. So is there one that you really, if you had to say where you felt like the course got into flow the most, where was it?
Nice, Luke.
Yeah. Well, So, assignments being assignments, I was very surprised at how excited some of the students were to, one, do the logic model, which was part of the second lab with programs and services, and then the letter of inquiry, that they were a little hesitant. They're like, well, what do I know about writing these grant applications? Giving them plenty of examples and shared with them a lot of different structures. And so they were actually excited to kind of apply those things. But I think logic model was the biggest challenge for them, but also the biggest learning moments where I saw them really grow as students to really understand outcomes and how you achieve outcomes and what the process looks like to get to those outcomes. And so even just understanding the difference between outcomes and outputs and all the things along the way to get there. So really fully understanding what an outcome is too. A lot of them really got it. You could see it in their face. They actually got it and was like, oh, okay, now I understand what nonprofits are trying to do. So yeah, that one I think surprised me, that they were very excited about the logic model.
Awesome. Do I see any other hands? No, great. All right. Mary, you're next on my list.
Okay.
You ready?
Well, yeah. So Julie and I, we teach social research methods, and it involves quite a lot of lab work with doing social research in a time of social distancing, and it was, pretty astounding. I mean, here we are, a global pandemic. Everybody in the class is affected, and with different countries on different timelines, in terms of getting back, and that sort of thing. So we ended up touching base about that quite a bit. But when it became apparent that they just weren't going to be able to get out and into the communities to do some of the social research methods they'd chosen, such as focus group discussions and even just interviews with people who are getting together to build models, they weren't able to do that. So we had them make some adjustments in the beginning. I guess it hit us about a third of the way into the course. So they did really well. I mean, they came up with things that they could do, telephone interviews. Some of them were able to do Zoom meetings and use those as focus groups. Others were able to, they also did photo voice, because enough people have phone cameras and can take pictures and upload, and they were able to do mixed methods in terms of administering surveys and quantifying the information and getting that back for comment. I know one of the students was just dismayed that he only had 11 respondents to a Facebook group, because he wanted to do work with the childcare situation, childcare providing in his county in Pennsylvania, and he couldn't go to the childcare. They were all closed. So, this was the case, and so he had to go to the Facebook group, and he just made an open call, and he got 11 responses, and we were like, yes, that's really good. That's a good group to start with. You don't know how, Margaret Mead, it's a small group of people that changes the world. And anyway, so we had that in a few cases where it was a small group, and to just really, work with the students and say, look, this is it. This is what research is. You have to adapt. You have to sometimes just turn on a dime. And they did really well. We had 12 students, and the upside of everybody being home is that we had fabulous attendance. Everybody showed up, and Julie and I both, instead of just swapping off classes, we were both there all the time. And the breakout groups were great. Students were complaining that they were too short. So it was really great that we did have the, I know we'd get in the chat box after we'd reassemble everybody, and it was too short. So anyway.
Good problem to have. In
Yeah.
some ways.
Yeah, no, it was a wonderful, wonderful group of students. I think it was, some of them did have some real setbacks. The organizations they had decided that they would work with, just backed out, I mean, it was just, but they ended up being able to find something, and even those who weren't able to do as much of the social aspect, they were able to actually do some good groundwork by getting some of the kinds of research done ahead of the social research. So yeah, I mean, it was tough. It was a struggle for a lot of them, but they gave really great presentations at the end. Julie and I were actually pretty amazed.
So your community lab is working through a couple of different types of social research methodologies, right?
Yes, we take them through a wide range of research methodologies, including quantitative measures, forms of measure, also participatory action research, and they identify some of the tools that they really want to work with. And then they end up refining that. They have to come up with a research question. They have to come up with a statement of guidelines and principle of ethics, basically. How am I going to protect the identities and the confidentiality? And what am I going to give my participants to sign, to get informed consent? We take them through all of that, and they design their own guidances, basically a philosophy of doing social research. And
they end up with a presentation.
They do a lightning presentation.
That's right.
And then they submit a full report. And they've all done it. And coming up, and we work hard on the research question, because you start off with a vague kind of, well, I wonder how we could improve childcare, in this county. And then you realize you have to find out a lot more about what's going on with childcare, and by the end of it, you end up with something like, how can we? I mean, I don't remember exactly what he ended up with, but you end up refining. You end up really having to refine stuff.
So Mary, I'm curious, how many did do the photo voice?
Oh, okay. I can't give you an exact number. I'd say there was probably about 4.
Okay. And you had how many in the class?
12.
12. Okay.
Photo voice was very attractive, and it's powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions for Mary? Cool. Yeah. I'm glad from a. Go ahead, Luke.
I had a question, which was just if in that you saw any kind of greater, or you felt like you saw the greater adaptation or adoption of using technology for social research.
Yes.
So, because you were talking about using Zoom and those sort of things, doodle polls. I'm just curious.
Especially the Vietnamese students, several of them. I mean, they just. Because they're working on, usually they all, not all of them, but most of them did bending bamboo. So it was about improving the acquisition of English language among students. And yes, they used Zoom. The students from Africa and Haiti, just the challenges, the internet and access, the connectivity is just such a challenge. I mean, most of the time we couldn't get video going with them. So they weren't able to do that, but they were able to work with phones and telephones. But I mean, iPhone for digital transfer they did some of the photo voice. Yeah, there was some work with technology. It was good in that way.
Great. Dan,
I
yeah, go ahead.
I just had a quick, slightly off the subject comment on this.
Sure.
I happened on a group that is on a Facebook group that is the problems of being black while birding.
Oh,
And
that's great. Yeah.
One of them was
Right.
complaining that she was a graduate student in urban ecology.
Mhm.
She was going into a neighborhood and with binoculars and making observations, and that the police started to follow her, and that the people were getting anxious. And I was saying, you know, that happens anywhere in the world when a stranger comes in and starts, you know, riding down and using instruments. And there are ways of, you go into a new place and you go to the authorities and you explain what you're going to do. And so there are ways of dealing. I just thought that because when they described it, you know, this is how you would not go into any community anywhere that I know of and not explain, or if you appear to be taking a picture of somebody, not to ask permission first and explain to them what you're doing. So that's research methods 101 would be for people to know what you're doing when you're there.
Absolutely. No, well, as a birder myself, it's definitely a different kind of protocol. I think if you're moving around an urban neighborhood with binoculars, you know, I mean, people could think that you're trying to figure out what's in their houses, you know, so you have to be very careful that I mean, forget it. If that bird lands in front of somebody's bedroom window, you're just not going to look at it. You can look at it off to the side, right? Challenging.
Dan and Liz, did you have, I see you're unmuted, so just checking in.
Yeah. So building on those last comments from Mary and Dan, the Vietnamese cohort always has to explain itself to the authorities. And you don't explain yourself after the fact, you must explain yourself before the fact. And in a communist state, in a socialist republic, you only move forward with permission from the authorities step by step.
Okay.
So they're creating a cradle-to-cradle curriculum that isn't just English. It's using the English classroom to teach the SDGs in an applied way. So all the topics of the curriculum they're writing are the SDGs in real time with Vietnamese data in Vietnamese classrooms in order to make, you know, a very significant change in the Delta. But again, they've got to have permission to use those binoculars in any way. So their lab doesn't change term by term, but the emphasis and the focus that they have on their community lab term by term and course by course does change. And it's giving them a good holistic integrated approach. So to have, Mary, your perspective on social science research is really helpful. And then their context for doing that is in a state where social science research has never been allowed on a public school campus.
Wow.
So I want to come back to that at the end of these comments, because I find the creative, quiet way in which they pull this off always to be astounding.
Yeah.
And I'm going to close on that astounding note. So their project in the course with Liz and me was lifelong development education. And each of them, those that were enrolled for credit, and we had 8 others that were not enrolled for credit, so we had 13 in the class. They either were working at the preschool and the kindergarten, or the grades 1 to 3, or 3 to 5, or 6 to 9, or 10 to 12, or university, or workforce, or seniors. They all had an age level, and they were looking at the human development stages and the psychology, the educational psychology of, well, how do you get across sustainable development to a preschooler? And how do you get sustainable development across to a grandparent in a multi-generational home. And how do you get them to do it all together? That was their challenge. And they've also spent in prior semesters a lot of effort trying to build out pilot global classrooms that connect rural to urban schools and rich to poor schools, private to public system schools. And a lot of our effort last semester was refining the global classroom. And then COVID-19 hit. And in Vietnam, it hit during Tet, so mid-January, a week after our FBC course left Vietnam after graduation. COVID-19 is already locking down the marketplace and every school from preschool to university by mid-January. So all the global classroom work we did physically in terms of equipment was for naught because nobody could gain access to the campus. And so a combination of people from cohort 1 and cohort 2 modified the community lab to say, okay, we're going to do it not on campus. So we're changing the locus of our community lab. We're going to do it on cell phones now. So they took everything that they had learned through the experimentation with a physical global classroom connecting all these different groups and ages and people of wealth and farmers with no wealth. And they came up with a way to revise their curriculum so that it was for the vast majority of people who only have cell phone access. 30% have laptop and internet access at home. 70%, the other 70%, teachers included, had cell phones. So this was totally voluntary. It was when all the schools were shut down, nobody was allowed on campus, and the teachers didn't skip a beat. You know, Kelly and Christy, for all the effort that goes into hosting on Zoom and Moodle and Mahara and all these other platforms, I mean, that redounded to their resilience in a time when the system said, we're shutting down. They didn't need to, and they didn't. So they took one of the chapters that they had already completed on health, public health, primary health, and they converted it to a COVID-19 curriculum. And they offered it to students on a voluntary basis and to workforce employees on a voluntary basis. And they connected those two generations. We'd have maybe 70 students at a time on Zoom in classes conducted by our students on COVID-19. So an underlying purpose of Bending Bamboo is to give Vietnam a voice that pretty much has never been listened to. I mean, from the war forward, from a century and a half of colonialism forward, Vietnam has not had a voice that the world has listened to. We have millions of books about Vietnam, and they're written by Americans, and they're generally about a war period. They're not about who the Vietnamese are. So the underlying premise of Bending Bamboo is if this community lab can answer two predominant policies from the government to become bilingual, so that's, Mary, the importance of learning English. It's a nationwide goal to be bilingual from being monolingual, and to do it through the SDGs. To pull that off is to give Vietnamese a voice to shout out what they do well. Not to talk to each other about what they do well, but to get the point across to the world what they do well. So Vietnam has not had a single COVID-19 death. They've had about 320 cases in a country of 97 million. So a third of the population of the US, 30% of the population of the US, no deaths, 320 cases all cured, and they live on the border with China, and the largest minority in Vietnam are the Chinese, who go back and forth to Wuhan. So this was a chapter for them to write about that was actually shouting out what they're doing differently. Last night on the PBS NewsHour, towards the end of the hour, there was a 5-minute segment on what Vietnam has done right with COVID-19. And it was kind of a, reaction from the class, because that's exactly what they were shouting out. The difference is this: the spin on the PBS NewsHour was that it worked because Vietnam is an authoritarian country with a communist government that can make people behave. And the spin from the students was, we are a communalist culture that does things collectively. And yeah, when we're told to do something, we do it, but we're doing it for a collective, not a political purpose. So this was a cool semester. And Mary, you're right. 16 weeks, though 16 weeks long, which is a long time, 4 months, is not enough time. And so the course is segueing into an independent study that'll go until December 31st to complete the project that they've begun because of COVID-19 in revising what they've done for grades 6 to 12 and outlining what they're going to do for grades 3 to 5 in a curriculum that's shouting out for the Vietnamese benefit, but for the world's benefit, what they're doing right. So I want to get back to social science research and getting permission from authorities. So because the schools were closed, everything they were doing was off hours. And while they've been stymied in getting permission from the party and from the government to carry out social science research on public school campuses, the government doesn't direct them on what they do in their own time on Zoom, at home, with students, volunteering their time, and employees at Intertech and OWN Semiconductor volunteering their own time. So in the last session, Zui, who is one of our graduates in January, and he's a high school teacher, really, really respected by the authorities, but he's not a party member. Towards the end of class, he pans back with his webcam and he shows that he's been filming the whole thing with a tripod and a camera of all of us on Zoom for the last 90 minutes. And he's streaming this simultaneously to the party and to the government authorities, who are skeptical about how good is it to use Zoom. And Zui's point was, it's awesome. And you've got to allow us to do more of this because it works. So that's our community lab. It's far from completed. In all reality, it's going to take us to about 2024, funded or not funded, paid or not paid, to complete the lab. But that's where we're at.
Great. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Okay, so Dan Robeson, if you could follow up with what you've done for your community labs and how that went this semester, that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, this is a course I've taught before with very similar materials. So as always, I'm surprised when there's something you think, oh, this is going to work, and then you try it again and it doesn't work. Some of the things that I had done with group dynamics previously didn't work so well now. I won't go into detail because they were minor things. But the course I was teaching is sustainable communities, but the approach I give it is we look at community-based natural resource management of different types. And we also look into sustainable livelihoods approach development model. And so it is based on being able to having tools to measure different vulnerability within a community, even within a household, and the fact that this isn't stable, that people can become more vulnerable very quickly. And COVID comes along. And we had US students in the discussions, all of a sudden feeling more vulnerable and saying, wow, this is, I've never had to think about these things before. And now I do. So having COVID in the background was, again, a real learning experience here, and having this sample where any Zoom session, a discussion period, you have a sample across the world is incomparable for this sort of thing. It didn't really work to go into small groups and then come back this time. There was a real difference in English and kind of expectations. So the group work, what coming back into plenary didn't work so well. This time I expanded what I had done before of having an outside speaker come in on the ground and taping an interview with them ahead of time, having people see the video, and then having a live question and answer period. So I had an indigenous leader here from Bolivia that is one of the nationally known leaders, but she came up through ecotourism, found her voice through ecotourism. And so the unit that we looked at ecotourism, we had her come in and talk about the relationship between, and so that went well. It was long, the video was long, but people continued to ask and make reference to that. And our other speaker was Mike Recklin. When we're looking at community-based forest management, talking about Nepal, and then increasingly West Virginia, which is good. And then I had a third person lined up who failed me. So we were going to have a person speak when we did community-based wildlife management, speak from Namibia, and at the last moment didn't show up, so we had to do some adaptive management there. But the idea, where the experts are not at Harvard or Cornell, they're on the ground somewhere, and these subjects that works. It's a lot of work to line them up, interview them ahead of time, edit that, and put it up. But I think sprinkling that in to the Zoom sessions over a 16-week period is very useful. With more editing, these could be put up permanently, but just like another thing that has to be done. But that can be done. It's there. One final comment that I want to make was I have been saying forever about the importance of peer presentation to peers for engaging people that are kind of fallen behind or not really putting their mind into it. And so we had a quite disparate group with class, because we had about half of it were what we're calling certificate students, and they were taking longer to engage. But at the end of the term, they all had to make a presentation. And what I've noticed now as I'm going back and grading and filling in the holes, some of them got engaged for this presentation and then went back and did a lot of previous work. So they can punt the ball with the professor. They can punt it down the field any number of times, but when they have to present to their peers, it's when it really when their mind engages. So I think the next step here is for me to have something like that earlier in the term, where they perhaps a live presentation on their ideas because we just had one long community lab. And so so that they're kind of committing publicly to a set of ideas and then having to be responsible to their peers. So I believe in this business of presenting to the peers, but we need to find a way of moving that earlier in the term. So those were the main things that I wanted to comment. Just given our subject matter, the power of being able to talk about food security when the world is shutting down, and then talking about water security, which is not shutting down in the same way, and being understanding the relationships between that. So it was a difficult semester, but I think that given the subject matter, it went well.
Thanks, Dan. I do think we've done an amazing job. We have very few students that are taking incompletes, and all our faculty have managed to stay around and on schedule. So considering, the other, I'm sure we're all involved with other universities as well, and how much more extra work they're all having to take on to kind of do this enormous pivot to what we've already been doing. It becomes very, it's just pretty cool from my perspective. Do you want to have questions for Dan? I do have a couple of things I want to catch up, and I've got 5 minutes here. So, Daniel?
I just want to, Dan, say how much I appreciate your comments on the certificate students who then got roped in when they had to make the presentation to their peers. I've been having parallel conversations with Kelly, emphasizing the hope for peer engagement. And I do believe that there's a huge amount of learning in that process and your experience. I just want to flag it. I found that particularly helpful. Thank you, Dan.
Well, I can remember, Daniel, you were sitting in Nepal. We were I can't remember the name of the place now, but you were sitting in on the practicum presentations, and you were delighted because this was the fourth semester that they were doing it. But I had noticed in each of those semesters the way some people really engage their mind when they're thinking, oh, I've got to present to my peers. So we've been experimenting with ways of how you can get that same effect on, in people that have never met each other and may never meet each other.
Well, the role of teaching in order to learn essentially is what we're talking about here, but also figuring out what is true and what is, just a clever argument you're making to get by. Peers are very good at sort of calling the truth out, but it demands a higher. I'm very appreciative that you're testing it. Thank you.
I would just say, this is a comment relating to that. I think we had, there's this sort of Montessori philosophy, which is you learn it, you review it, and then you teach it to others. That's for kids, but we invited Rosie Lynch to come in and talk. She was a student from last year's social research method. She helped pioneer our package, and she came in and talked basically about her experience as a student going through all of this, and how she dealt with the problem of the research question and actually refining her idea of what her community was, and and how that all changed over the course of her project. And it was tremendously, it was great. It really worked well. So this was like not quite the peer level, but it was somebody who had to walk the path ahead of the others. And students had lots of questions, and Rosie was fantastic. She was a rock star. And anyway, just
great,
letting you know.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. Yeah, I think when we started out this Zoom as synchronous time experiment, we were sort of, starting a new thing that no one else was doing. And now everybody's doing this synchronous time on Zoom. And so it's now old hat. So now, as Dana likes to do, and I like to do, we're going to innovate. We're going to come up with new things, new ways, because our colleagues around the world are now discovering Zoom and discovering that a lot of things can be done synchronously. And we're going to be discovering sort of what more, how more can we help facilitate students learning through this medium. So one thing that comes up a lot, and we're still refining and trying to do a job of coming up with community labs that really work well, coming up with lots of different examples of community labs so that faculty who come in, who this new, sort of a slightly new concept, can see what other people have done and what they're doing and what works well, what people have had trouble with. That's one thing we're really working on. Paul is taking notes about what you guys have all been saying. The other thing, and Dana alluded to this, is sort of we've always really been interested in peer-to-peer learning as an institution, and we are going to even sort of push that envelope to be sort of even more core to the institution. So over the course of into the fall semester, we're going to facilitate more structured. I think what we found is that we need some more structured guidance around what to do in those peer-to-peer small groups. Some groups are better at that than others, and so we're going to come up with some sort of guidelines that we have as an institution, and share those with the faculty, of course, and then we'll come up with a plan for sharing those with students. There will be a working title is Learning in the Digital World, 1 credit course coming up in the fall. So that will be able to put a lot of these secondary curriculum teasers into that course that then you as the faculty can build upon those. So there's going to be a huge change in the way Moodle looks. Mahara's had a huge update. We're going to really this summer put together a better package for both faculty and students on how to get into Mahara, what parts of Mahara we need to use, just make it a better sort of onboarding experience for students, because it's definitely something we're lacking in a lot of places, especially since we're saying you need to create e-portfolios. We need to be supporting students and faculty and what that means. So I just wanted you to know that is on the books. And yeah, so and so just to get techie on you, I said Moodles has an update, Mahara has an update. We've actually just figured out a way to use a Moodle plugin to actually facilitate peer-to-peer assessment. So we're going to work on how that works, whether it's formative assessment, summative assessment, where to introduce it, and kind of come up with the different variables that we think we would like faculty to try, and for us to put in the sort of the normative experience here at Future Generations. So I think Dan Westner unmuted himself.
I did.
Okay.
A question and a comment. Question, sure. In the middle of COVID-19, I worked with some colleagues to do a virtual memorial service for a friend who died of COVID-19. Mm-hmm. And my colleague introduced me to the webinar feature. Yep. And I'm not sure that we have access. I tried to do what she was doing, but is it something that institutionally, Paula, as the woman behind the screen, do we have to be allowed into using webinar as a feature? Because we were able to very effectively engage 170 people in a very interactive memorial service, more interactive than a regular face-to-face memorial service. But
Paula, you want to take that?
Sorry, I missed part of it. I had
Sorry.
How do we do that?
Sorry.
Our question.
So the answer is you pay for it. So
yeah.
We don't pay for webinar.
I see.
The Acer,
expensive add-on.
Very expensive. The Acer grant has allowed us to trial it with if everyone's seen their Maple, they're having a Maple session on webinar. So that will be hosted by us.
I see.
But yeah, you have to, it's a different package, but it's definitely there.
How much is it?
It goes by how many hosts you want and how many participants. It can get up to $4,000 a month.
Okay, so it's I was gonna say that in theory for this Acer event, can I buy an annual subscription for the team? But it sounds like the billing would prohibit that.
I think it's $400 a month seems to be what you're gonna go with.
Yeah.
So if you want to, feel free, Luke, because we only need really one host, which we can switch around since we've gotten really good at that. Anyway, sorry.
I might be able to pay for it throughout the summer because this is a thing so let me look at it if it's a need, because I think it's an important feature, and this is exactly where we see the programs doing cross synergy. And yeah, I mean, if we need it for Acer, we should get all the mileage out of it we can. And if the upcoming event's a success, my hope would be to do another one. And in which case, then we can keep going. So let's keep that conversation going, because I think it's worthwhile. And this is like, if I can bill that to Acer grant, I want the institution to benefit.
So that was my question. I also have a comment. And Kelly, this builds on your point.
Okay.
Yeah, we were doing we were doing Zoom before Zoom was cool. And a lot of people adapted to Zoom on the turn of a dime overnight, like the California State University system overnight, actually within 10 days time, converted 72,000 courses to things that were offered on Zoom, for better or for worse. In many cases for worse, because it takes a lot of practice to do Zoom well. But I've attended webinars and I've listened to leading educators, and they've been talking about the future of education after COVID-19. And while Zoom has gone from a subscriber base of about 50 million to 500 million in no time, I wish I had bought stock. Everybody I've listened to online is talking about, you know, this is temporary. This is bridging us until we get back to the normal. This is getting us back to fall when people will be back on campus, or we'll be doing some hybrid. We'll do a hybrid of on campus and online. I think what distinguishes us is that this isn't a temporary patch. This isn't a hybrid. This is our understanding of the future of community to community. You call it peer to peer, and that's, you know, the person to person part of it, but it's community to community, culture to culture, country to country possibilities of a Zoom, Mahara, Moodle approach to very, very inclusive education. And while there are limitations, Dan pointed this out, you know, you can't have a practicum in Nepal where everybody is seated in a circle and you're enjoying good drink and food while listening to the practica. This is way more inclusive than any era of education that we've had before. So we could be way out in front on how we demonstrate that for ourselves and for our students, their communities, and education peers.
And I think you have a point that it's way more inclusive, but another conversation that's been going around that combines also the aspect of Black Lives Matter is that there's a huge equity gap also when you're using electronics. And I think it came up with what Erica was saying, that many of our African students just don't have the bandwidth. And I don't know why they can't get their act together with, I mean, it's huge political issues there too. Unfortunately, not with the good results that Vietnam is having and taking care of their population, but there is a huge equality aspect with electronic delivery also. And so I think that that's a question, you know, for the world going into electronic delivery that we have to be able to answer.
You're absolutely right. And so it's what we do by laptop and tablet and desktop computer. It's what we do by cell phone.
Yeah.
And
yeah. So we're definitely trying. Yep.
Is how do we make it work?
Right.
And for whom are we making it work? And how hard are we going to try to make it work in an inclusive way?
Yeah. And just so you know, that was the last cabinet meeting. That was the content of the meeting. How far do we go down this route of mobile first? Because that's the reality, right? And for us, we're small and changeable, but that does take kind of a lot of capital investment. So for the most part, we are the changes that I'm talking about for the summer. That's kind of our lodestar, and but we're trying to do it without bringing, you know, the cost. There's plenty of people out there who would happily transition our curriculum to a text-based system if you want to pay them for it. Even I could tell you all about that. But you know, it costs money, and it's not the goal, right? We don't really want, you know, just the content running on your text. Anyway, I digress. Does anybody else have any? We're way over time, but does anyone have anything else they want to? It's really great to see you all. I'm going to talk. Oh, Andrea's there. We're supposed to have a meeting after this because this is our first meeting back on the faculty. So it's great to see you all. We'll see you in June. Some of you. Bye, Christy and Jody.
Bye.
Bye.
You're still here, Daniel. Oh, good. Okay. Whew. This
Hi.
baby is, hi, I'm going to stop recording. There we go.